Hello everyone and welcome back to another book review. Today I'm going to be reviewing a book about D&D. So I am, let's call it casually involved with D&D. I have a D&D group of friends that I play with and I've been playing with them for, let's say, 5 years now, minus the pandemic time when I lived in another city, so I couldn't join them, but also it was the pandemic, so they weren't meeting anyways. And I really enjoy it. I wouldn't consider myself a hardcore fan, but I like meeting with my friends. It's kind of a really good excuse to meet up and kind of play out a little fantasy world. I enjoy reading fantasy and I feel like it fits neatly with that. So I really enjoy D&D, but I'm not like a hardcore fan, which is just my little plug here that if you have not tried D&D, it's actually super fun and I don't think there's any reason to be intimidated. I knew as a kid I was very intimidated because there would be this group that played at the public library that I volunteered at and they always seemed really intimidating. So I wish I had gotten the courage to try it sooner because it's a really fun game. So even though I play D&D, I'm not like I said, a hardcore fan and I don't really know a whole lot about it. I know my parents have some, I don't want to say prejudiced beliefs, but different beliefs regarding D&D than I do. But other than that, I really didn't know a whole lot about it. So when I was supposed to be studying at the library, but was actually just staring at the books on the shelves, as happens when I go study at the library, I saw this book, and that is The Rise of the Dungeon Master. It's Gary, and I hope I said his name right, Gygax? Gygax? We're going with Gygax. And the creation of D&D. So I'm just gonna call him Gary from here on out. And this book kind of describes the creation and the rise of D&D as a game. So maybe I should start with people who don't know what D&D is. It's a role-playing game, so you like create a character, but like on a piece of paper, and then you have one person called the Dungeon Master who runs the game. So he might set the scene and say, all three of you guys have entered a tavern in a town, and there seems to be a sketchy character in the corner. Maybe he calls you over and you have to act like you are your character in this world. And a lot of the decisions are made with rolling dice and deciding what happens based on the outcome of that dice. But this game had to start somewhere and it started here with Gary, we'll call him Gary. And realizing I didn't know the story of D&D, I decided to check it out. It's a really short book and it's also a comic, so it doesn't take very long to read. And I thought this might be a good way to, learn more about it. So very simply, this game started, or it came out of war games that were being played. Gary was very interested in these war games and the different ways you can play them. And he decided to kind of combine that with like a fantasy world, and it kind of grew from there. And I like the way that he describes how D&D is like an engine. It's like a system or a set of rules, but you can use it to make any sort of world that you want. So the book kind of starts with the beginning before D&D is invented. It goes through Gary and how he is playing these other games and then decides to make his own game, and then he also teams up with someone named Dave Arneson, so he's here in the book, and how they kind of work together to build this thing. They go through the eventual decision to kind of leave the company or to sell it, or after it's expanded. So at first it kind of starts small, but then it expands and D&D becomes very popular, or at least popular enough to where they can sell it and someone else manages it. They also talk about how D&D fed into the computer game, so the gaming that we would think of now and the way that it influenced it. So I like that it starts from the very beginning and goes all the way through to the implications of modern times, and it can fit all that into a book that isn't very thick. I also like how I never felt like the story was rushed or they were like leaving key details out. I felt like it was very cohesive throughout the entire thing, but also it wasn't like an in-depth 500-page history of D&D that I'm reading. It's just nice and accessible. It's perfect for, like me, the casual fan who just wants to know more. I think if maybe you're really a hardcore fan, you want to know all the details, this might not be the perfect book for you. But if you're like me, you're just a casual player, or maybe you don't play D&D, but you're just really interested in this game and how it came about and the way that it's influenced modern games or modern society, I guess you could say. Not necessarily modern society, but the modern culture. This would be a really good book for you. I also like that they took a little bit of time to discuss some of the controversies that came out. I think they were like in the 80s with D&D characters and kind of like, not D&D characters, D&D and the scare some people had and the different groups that were convinced that this was a very evil game, but also included Gary's response that was basically like, it's just a set of rules. It's no more evil than anything else. So I like that little inclusion. They did have one chapter in there, and I liked yeah, the presentation, I felt like it was just enough information that I needed. It was just what I'm looking for. It was very well done. I liked the art in it. I liked the style in it. I think I split it into 2 nights, so I read half of it one night and half of it another night, but it was very, very enjoyable, and I'm glad that I pulled it off the shelf because I feel like I learned a little bit and I'm a little bit smarter for having read this book. So if you're looking for a book on D&D, or you don't know where to start, or you're really not super heavily involved and just want to know the basics of how the game got started, this would be a very good book. It's very accessible. I love it. And I think you should pick it up and read a copy, or pick yourself up a copy and give it a read and let me know what you think. Other than that, everyone, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.